Okay, everybody, how you doing? Happy Memorial Day to you all. I am going to discuss your lecture for Monday, June 4. I know we're a week early, but that's the way I want to start doing these lectures, is go ahead and discuss them a week early ahead of time. So that way, when you come to class prepared to discuss with me, which is part of your participation grade, and dialogue with me. And then I will give you some pop quizzes at the end of the week to ensure that you are paying attention to my lectures. Okay, it's real important, very vital to your online learning or your blended learning, if you will. Coming to class 2 nights a week, and then the rest of the time you are to, excuse me while I appropriate myself, the rest of the time you are to learn on your own independently and then come to class and learn as well. Okay, excuse me for burping. So in chapter 1, Intro to Healthcare Terminology, in your anatomy physiology book, it's discussing the World Health Organization, the ICD-10, clinical modification, the ICD-10 PCS, and know that medical terminology matters. It matters a great deal. I know you're probably wondering why does it matter? It's like a foreign language, if you will. It's like any other career. If you're coming into the career of healthcare, be it nursing, be it health information management, be it being a physician, medical assistant, LMRT, you have to understand the career lingos of what they're talking about as far as different body dimensions, different parts of the body, how that relates in sentence structure when you're writing notes, such as patient notes, physician notes. All those type of things really matter. And then as a coder, you are to abstract that information from the SOAP notes and relate that over to a diagnosis code or a procedure code, and then send that over into billing. So that is why it is important to learn healthcare terminology, okay? It's just like if you're going to visit Italy, you got to know Italian. Maybe not fluently, but maybe enough to get you around if you're a visiting person. If you're going to France, you got to be familiar with French language. If you're going to Latin America, be it Mexico, be it Spain, somewhere that speaks Spanish language in the Spanish culture, Dominican Republic, places like that, Belize, then you need to be familiar with Spanish, and so on and so forth. Or even with Germany, you got to be familiar with the language, with the German language. Okay, so that is why it is very important. I'm going by the lecture notes here, and I'm looking at the PowerPoint notes. I don't, there's a timer. Okay, great. I'm sure it'll time me out to let me know how much time I have before it uploads on its own. I imagine that's how it still works. Okay, so great. So it's asking on the third slide, what is medical terminology? A specialized vocabulary composed of Greek and Latin words. Okay, and you're already familiar with this. For those of my students that have been in class 4 months already, you're going into your 5th month, you're counting down, woohoo, you're almost there to come out and graduate and move on. That's great. To my other ones that are moving into their 2nd month with me, you got a while to go, okay? So you should be familiar with root words, suffix, prefix, combining forms, what all that takes to make such words and terminologies. Now, you have what they call are decodable terms. And again, those are your root words, combining forms, your suffixes, and your prefixes. You have your non-decodable terms, which is composed of words such as cataract or asthma, things of that nature. Okay. I'm moving along here. Diagnosis, moving on to slide 7. Diagnosis is the present condition. Prognosis is the future condition. Prognosis is what you can predict this person's illness to be until you have validated maybe some lab tests, maybe some radiology type stuff to request, if you will, or maybe some pathology or some other type review of systems that the doctor has to do, or the nurse practitioner has to do, or the physician assistant has to do in order to determine that proper diagnosis. Okay, so we're going to talk about that eventually. Condition that results from injury or disease. Those are called late effects. I think I talked about in class once before that if Johnny, and I'm just saying by example, if Johnny had broken his arm, okay, this past Christmas, and later on the weather changes, maybe Johnny is having some sort of contact dermatitis or some sort of skin irritant that's happening, and you can't quite understand where the skin irritation is coming from, then it may be a late effect of that fracture. Maybe there's something that's below the surface of the skin, and it depends if it was an open fracture or a closed fracture, and how that fracture healed, the healing processes of the fracture. And it also depends if that fracture may have caused some other tissue damage or some other glandular damage or some kind of artery type or venicular vein type damage. So sometimes those may arise some dermatological issues. Sometimes they may arise some muscle issues. So there are various type things. Maybe the healing process didn't take well. And so you have to look into the fact, okay, does Johnny have high sugar diabetes, and he needs to be tested. Maybe he has to have a glucose monitoring testing done for certain hours at a time. So those are called late effects. Okay, anything that has happened before or disease that has happened before may cause another disease to rise up from something that happened before. Okay, all right. And so guideline alert, we have that late effect is a residual effect after the acute phase of an illness or an injury has been terminated, okay, such as fractures or things of that nature. Sometimes you can have a late effect after a pregnancy. It could be a late effect of cesarean. Sometimes you can have numbness and tingling of the legs, and you've had a cesarean type surgery procedure done. And so now you're faced with something else, those type of things. And they have to send you to another specialist to determine if those are considerable late effects. Okay, then you have the condition or nature that a late effect is sequenced first. Okay, so again, let's go back to Johnny, for example. Johnny broke his arm right around Christmas. It is now July later this year, and Johnny is having some sort of skin reaction or skin irritant. Okay, so it's unbearable. Benadryl topical cream couldn't help. Neosporin couldn't help. Cortisone 10 possibly couldn't help. Aloe vera juice, natural things could not help. So he goes to the doctor and he's like, well, what happened here? Oh, fell and broke my arm around Christmas. Oh, well, you may have a late effect, okay? So what ends up happening to the coder? The coder would have to sequence the, let's say it's skin irritation, um, um, subdural skin irritation due to a previous fracture to the right arm. So you would code the late effect, which is the present condition, which is the skin irritation, and then second, you would code the fracture. Okay, and you have to acknowledge what's happening present as well as historical. Okay, you always want to code that first. It's very important to sequence your codes for the best pay possible, and to also to keep your financial, how can I say, adjudication of claims or adjudication of bills from being pended as a stop for a question or denied because it's not recognizing your sequence. Although you may have it correct, you may have to switch the codes around. Okay, that matters greatly. All right, let's go on to slide number 8. When coding for sequela, there are typically 2 codes that are required. First, list the condition or nature of the sequela, and second, the sequela late effect. Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about sequelas. What are sequelas? And we'll come back and talk about that more in detail. Acute means short term. Okay. Acute bronchitis. Acute sinusitis, something that is short term that disappears but doesn't come back. Okay. Chronic is long term and it comes back. So if you're a person that battles with gout, I could say that for myself. I battle with gout. I may, God forbid, have gout today and may not ever have it again for another 2 months. It's a chronic type condition for me because it's something that I battle with ongoing and continuous. But if it's bronchitis, then that's something that I battle with seasonally, maybe once a year, maybe once every other year. Maybe I don't get it as severe. It depends on the immune system of the body. Okay. So it gives another guideline alert. And let me just say this about coding guidelines. Coding guidelines are very important. You need to read that in your ICD-10 book. I can't say it enough. For those who are not familiar with my class and my lecture teachings, let me show you what an ICD-10 book looks like. Okay. Now this is late. This is ICD-10 2017. Okay. You do have some books. The World Health Organization will renew these books every November 1st. Okay. I do have a 2018 book. I don't have it presently with me in my office. However, this is one that I'm just borrowing for right now for lecture purposes. Okay. All right. Fantastic. All right. Moving on to the next slide. You have signs and symptoms. A sign is objective. It is observable signs. If it can be measured or recognized, for examples, redness or rash. A stop sign is red. An octagon is 8 parameters around, 8 type stops around. Things of that nature. Symptoms are subjective, okay? They're a patient's explanation. I usually explain, put this book back. I usually explain to my students in lecture about SOAP notes, okay? Everyone should be about SOAP notes. Okay, let me pull out my beautiful highlighters in my teacher bag. Every good teacher should have a teacher bag full of highlighters and markers like I do. I have like 3 or 4 bags. And I have wonderful students who gift me with markers and pens and etc. And I love it. And believe you me, I keep every last one of them. Every last one. I don't give away my stuff. I'm very particular. Okay, so you have subjective, okay, and you have objective, and you have assessment, and you have plan. Okay, so let me just show you what this looks like. Hopefully, when this video uploads, you'll see this correctly. Subjective, objective, assessment, plan. Okay, now let me say this. Subjective is a conversation of the nurse and patient. Objective is the conversation between the physician or nurse practitioner and patient. Assessment is the review of systems. It also is comprised of the diagnosis code and the procedure code. And the plan is to say that you're going to return to the office, let's say in 2 weeks, okay? Or you've been giving cortisone 20. I'm just making up something. I'm not a pharmacist. I'm not a physician. Cortisone 20. You're going to take it TID. Okay. Now, this right here, let's hold it up like this, okay? This right here, assessment of the SOAP notes. If you're going to be a medical coder, a medical biller, especially outpatient or in the physician office standpoint, that is your job all day long. Okay, you are in need to read the subjective. Subjective is the conversation between the nurse and the patient. So let me give you an example. A nurse brings you to the room. She rooms you after she calls your name from the lobby, and she says, "How you doing, Mr. Jones? Okay, great. What brings you in today?" She's going to write down your onset or your chief complaint. What brings you in today? Mr. Jones is going to say, "Oh, I have a cough, I have a headache, and my stomach doesn't feel too well." Okay. Then she's going to write all this down. And under subjective, she's going to do vital signs. And in vital signs is comprised of your temperature, pulse, respiration, and blood pressure. All those small details matter. Why do they matter? Because when the physician comes in and have a conversation with the patient, he needs to know how to do the review of systems. The review of systems is the systems of the body. And there's 12 to 13. I would like to say 12, but they normally say 13. Some say 11. It just depends on how you could gather them together or separate them. Okay. It helps the doctor know where to start. Okay. Now, she writes down the vital signs. She writes down your height, your weight, what brings you in, how long you've been dealing with this. All that goes into subjective. Then objective is the physician and the patient having a conversation. Now the doctor comes in after the nurse has seen you and put your chart on the outside of the door or inside the computer. The doctor comes in with a laptop, or he comes in with a nurse that's going to scribe in the laptop what he's having a conversation about with you. Okay, it kind of frees him up from the written responsibility because that nurse, I'm sorry, my nose is running. That nurse or that scribe is writing that information. Okay, so now that doctor is going to do an assessment. An assessment is a review of systems. Let's say Johnny says he has a headache. Johnny says he has a stuffy head and his stomach doesn't feel well. So the review of systems says he's going to check his ear, nose, and throat. Okay. He's going to check his head and nerves for headaches. Let's see, he said his stomach hurts. So he's going to ask him some gastrointestinal type things. So those come from the 11 to 12 systems of the body. Okay. And the doctor is going to write this down and he's going to say, I need blood work to determine how's your blood sugar. I need a stool sample or do a hemocult to check and see if you have some sort of virus, and I also need to give you some medicine in the meantime, to help you feel better until I can determine with your lab works that it's all lining up with the review. Now, out of that, he's chosen 3 out of the 11 or 12 review of systems to determine what this person's diagnosis is. However, being that he has experience or she has experience as a physician, she does a residency, they've done a specialization, they've done their license, they've done their work, they trained under another physician. They pretty much have an idea what to give this diagnosis for the day. Okay. Every time a patient comes in, if this person, the doctor gives the diagnosis in the assessment part, saying that Johnny diagnosis is syncope, he has dizziness, headaches, he has a stomach virus, because he says he's throwing up, nausea, and his nose is running, so he has sinusitis. Okay, so he has how many diagnosis codes? He has 3 diagnosis codes from the 3 different systems of the body. Now, the doctor is going to say RTO, return to office. Okay, return to office in 2 weeks. Okay, and he's been giving, I would say cortisone, but I changed the scenario. He's been giving some Dimetapp, Tussin type cough medicine, and he's been given some medicine for his stomach, and he's told to take Tylenol for his headaches, or take Tylenol number 3 for his headaches and go to sleep, rest. Okay, and he's supposed to return to the office in 2 weeks. Now, when that patient comes back 2 weeks from, let's suppose today, then the soap notes starts all over again. Okay, the patient's going to come back. He's going to say, the nurse is going to ask in conversation, how are you today? Oh, I feel a lot better. I don't have headaches anymore. My stomach ache is gone. I'm not throwing up. I'm not nauseous. And my sinuses have finally dried up. Great. Okay. The doctor comes in. So, how did all that medicine work out? Did you finally get rest? Did your sinuses dry up? Yes, doc. My sinuses dried up. I feel a lot better. Yes, I thank you so much for your care. Okay, well, let me check your review of systems, the same 3 review of systems from the last time, just to make sure he doesn't hear any rattling noise in his chest, just to make sure he doesn't see anything fluid or some sort of mucus excretion from his nose. Make sure his ears doesn't have any infections. His eyes are looking okay. Okay, and then also he's pressing on his stomach to make sure, does that hurt? Is it tender? Okay. All right. So you're all clear. The plan is patient has been released to go home. Patient is all clear from 2 weeks ago of giving medication and plan. And that is it. And you're going to code again. This time the code going to come from here. Patient follow-up from headaches. You're going to give a code that it's going to be some sort of a historical present code that you're going to use. Just say that the patient came in for a well check of his last visit. And the procedure code, I forgot to mention about the procedure code. So the first time the procedure code, the doctor may have spent 20 minutes with the patient. So that means 20 minutes may equal out to be $125 or $150. Okay, we'll talk about how procedure codes work. This time, the patient came in, he was seen for 10 minutes, gave a great review. The patient is going to be given a level 1 procedure code instead of a level 2 from the first time. And so now that office visit code is going to be $75. Okay. And that's it. And then you're going to change your diagnosis word or your procedure words into numbers. Those get changed into numbers and you bill as usual. Okay. You bill as usual. Okay, fantastic. So just want to give that how that works. Signs and symptoms. Signs are something you can recognize. Symptoms are something that explains where the body is hurting. You know, those are differences between signs and symptoms. Okay. Codes that can describe signs and symptoms as opposed to diagnosis are acceptable for reporting purposes when relative definitive diagnosis has not been established by the provider. Okay. There are acceptable signs and symptoms are acceptable. So say like redness of the face, say like the stomach illness. Those are signs and symptoms until they're determined to say what type of stomach ache, what type of redness, is it rosacea? You know, those are more definitive as a symptom. Okay. Now, the etiology is caused by a disease disorder. Manifestation is the outward demonstration of the disease. I think I've given this type of talk once before, where manifestation codes. So let's give a prime example. I think I've taught this example more than once. If a person is diagnosed with diabetes, a lot of times with diabetes come high blood pressure. Okay. Now I'm going to turn this around and I am going to lecture from my board over here behind this camera. So I'm going to move some of this out the way. Let's see here. I want to make a mesh. Hold on. Let's turn this around. Yay! Yay! My office, my beautiful plants, my books, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then I'm going to turn this around. Okay, so here I come from around my desk. Oh, you see me now. Yay. Okay. Okay, fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, now, okay. Let me fix this screen a little bit. Let's see, can you see my screen? Can you see me? Okay, fantastic. Okay, so the manifestation codes, the etiology. Okay, manifestation codes. Let's talk about that for a minute. Okay, so. Okay, manifestation codes. Now, I don't know if you can see this as well, but we'll work on it. We'll work on it. Okay, so let's suppose it's diabetes. Okay, diabetes mellitus. And this is one of the main symptoms of the patient. Okay, now, let's suppose out of diabetes mellitus that this patient develops or they want to prevent high blood pressure. Okay, so from this is going to tree out hypertension. Hypertension is high blood pressure. Okay. And diabetes mellitus may also tree out numbness. Okay. And diabetes mellitus may also tree out gangrene. Gangrene. Forgive me if I don't spell it correct. Okay. Which is a healing process problem. Healing process problem. And it may also cause visual impairment. Okay. Now, one diagnosis code will lead to hypertension. It'll also lead to numbness. It'll also lead to gangrene. It'll also lead to not so much visual impairment, but visual where you have to have your eyes checked pretty often, maybe every 6 weeks, just to make sure that your vision is on par. Make sure you don't have any floaters. Sometimes a person with high blood pressure can do the opposite. They can have high blood pressure, but treat diabetes mellitus, treat off visual impairment and headaches and things of that nature. So what is Ms. Harper saying? Ms. Harper is saying that manifestation code starts off with one tree of a code and it branches off other diagnoses. It causes other illnesses to manifest. Okay, diabetes can also cause high blood pressure to manifest. Numbness of fingers and toes can cause a problem with the blood sugar and circulation not going the way it should and cause it to manifest. So that's what that's meaning by manifestation codes. Okay. All right. So the next screen we're going to look at, we'll talk about manifestation, syndrome. Syndrome is a group of signs and symptoms that consistently to appear together. Okay. Some ladies may have what you call PCOS. Okay. PCOS is a type of syndrome dealing with your endocrine system that sometimes may cause you to grow hair under here, underneath your chin, ladies. Sometimes it may cause you to have abnormal menstrual cycles. Sometimes it can cause you to have infertility because your metabolism is off. It makes your hormones go off. And so that is all what is called PCOS, P-O-C-S, those acronyms. I can't say it off the top of my head what PCOS is, but I'm very familiar with it on a personal level, so I know what that's about. That's a syndrome that is comprised of other systems of the body that's inclusive of other systems of the body that's causing a symptom a syndrome to occur. Okay, so that's what a syndrome is. It's a group of signs and symptoms that consistently appear together. Okay, all right, so this slide 17 is telling you about that and eponyms and abbreviations. Okay, abbreviations. Abbreviations are very, very important. Okay, when you are coding in a hospital system or a billing facility, you need to have a residential coding abbreviation book. And that coding abbreviation, the book of abbreviations, it is a standard book for all hospitals, all coding, billing facilities, insurance facilities. They use that standardized book. And it doesn't matter who the author is. It's all basically the same. It's just about how they designed it and what information they added to and didn't add. But they do all have the same basic abbreviations. Now, you're probably wondering, well, Ms. Harper, this is 2018. Should I get a 2017? Yes. Should I get a 2016? Yes. Should I get a 2015? That's kind of a little bit too old. But I would stick with 2016, 2017. Sometimes the additions or the changes yearly, periodically, is a smidge, not very much, but it will still keep you in the safe zone of understanding medical abbreviations. And I'll give you an example of medical abbreviations. I need to get a napkin. Give me a minute. Uh-oh. Wait a minute. That's permanent marker, Jesus. What did I do? What did I do, Jesus? Okay. I use a permanent marker instead of my dry erase. Oh, my goodness. What am I gonna do? I'm gonna have to get some acetone to erase this. So it's gonna take me a while. So I'm gonna have to use something else. Okay. Okay. We'll use this for right now. So let me move my beautiful chair away and get some more of my, well, I got what I need. Okay, so medical abbreviations. Okay, so we have HTN, we have IV, we have, let's see here, hypertension, DB, diabetes, mellitus. We have with, without. Let's see some other abbreviations here. Oh, TURP and AIDS. Okay, TURP, TURP, and then AIDS. And then we have HIV. Okay, very good. So these are some of your common medical abbreviations that are used on a daily basis of your life of being a medical biller, medical coder, and you have to use your medical abbreviations book to understand what that is. Okay, and then after a while, you really won't need that book anymore or as much. You'll be able to know it from off the top of your head because it becomes routine all day, every day. Okay, fantastic. Let's go on to the next slide. Medical abbreviations. Okay, it talks about the danger of that. Oh, okay. I'm sorry, give me just a moment. Hello? Hey, Steve, what's going on? Yes. I got some, but I didn't get I got enough money on the bottom. You want to stop off and get you something from our house? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine, sweetie. Okay, sweetie. Oh, no. I'm at my house. It's just me. Okay, sweetie. All right. Yeah, take your time. Okay, take your time. Take your time. Okay, bye. Okay. All right, fantastic. All right, so it's going to tell you about some dangers of using medical abbreviations, and I'm going to go forward. Okay, fantastic. So I want you all to really look into this slide here. It has about a lot of slides here to learn and to know all about. And it's pretty much self-explanatory. I'm going to cut this review of video short. It's about 40 minutes long. Let me explain the careers. Let me spend the next 20 minutes explaining the careers of medical billing and coding while we're on this. The careers of medical billing and coding is very good. I've been in the field for 32 years. Love it. Wouldn't trade it for nothing. Healthcare, that is. I love teaching. You start off as a medical coder. You go for it as a medical biller. Now, I tell my students all the time that when you're in a field like this, that you may not necessarily just do your job as a medical biller. You may have to help out at the front desk, checking in patients. That's good. Medical billing is comprised of that. Everything that happens in a physician's office from front to back affects the coding and billing process from front to back. Okay. Now, checking in the patients, making sure all the demographics are in, that matters a whole lot. And I may repeat myself in another video on this. Okay. Verifying insurance. You may get a job as a insurance verifier. There's nothing wrong with that. We all had to start somewhere. And I was one of those where I had to start somewhere. Okay. And so verifying insurance, putting the patient's information in the system, making sure that when everything is processed electronically, that when it travels to, how can I say, through the adjudication process of the clearinghouse and everything, that nothing is stopping it. Okay. Then you do the coding and then you do the billing. Once you do the billing, you press that lovely button and you may have 50 patients that you're billing for that day. Okay. Your kickback percentage should be no more than 10%. So what is 10% of 50 patients? It's about 5 patients. Okay. That's about 5 errors. Okay. You shouldn't have any more than that. Okay. Now, once that goes through, then everything is okay. So you press the billing button, it goes through. From there, it goes through a clearinghouse. The clearinghouse is usually the middleman between the medical biller and the insurance company. Okay. The clearinghouse is like the filter between the medical biller and the insurance company. So if everything goes well inside of the wheel of the clearinghouse, then it's going to go through to the to the insurance company. It could be Aetna, it could be Cigna, it could be United Health, it can be Medicare, Medicaid, okay? And it's going to do its job. Now, normally it takes 7 to 14 business days before you receive a response. Now, it's usually customary. They usually say when you call an insurance company, it's reasonable and customary to wait 7 to 14 business days. Okay. Anything can happen at the insurance company. And I've worked in the insurance industry for 12 years. Okay. Sometimes there's a system glitch. Sometimes there's a system letdown. Sometimes we have to let the system rest from 12 midnight to 2 in the morning before we can pick back up to work. It stays awfully cold in those insurance companies when we're processing claims, trying to get those claims answered and sent back out to the providers. as well as if you're working for a medical facility doing billing, it's awfully cold in those rooms because they have to keep it really cold to make sure that the functionality of the computers work well. So what ends up happening when the claim finally gets to the insurance company? Three things, and I usually tell my students all the time. The claim is going to either pay, pend, or deny. Okay, pay, pend, or deny. Okay, all right. So since the claim is going to pay, pend, or deny, you want the claim to pay if you've done all what you know you should have done. Second, if it's going to pend, it's pending for various reasons. Doesn't mean that you necessarily did a bad job. It just means that, okay, it's pending because the insurance company is requesting full-time student information. Maybe this is a student that's 19 years old and they still under the parents' insurance as a dependent. Dependents have a right to be on the insurance up until the age of 16. I'm sorry, to the age of 26, as long as they can show full-time student status. Okay. What if there's been a change of in a life event in the family? Maybe a child was adopted. Maybe a child was born into the family. Maybe there was a divorce or a separation. Some of those variances can cause that. What if the diagnosis gave off a clue that was this an accident at work or an auto accident? Even though you may have clicked that box and say no, 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 it's still going to ask that for a reason for documentation on the insurance company's part. Okay, they need to know that. Okay, now, and it may ask you some other details to fill out some forms. Okay, that's where you, the medical biller, will have to do some investigative work. Okay, so when you get those EOBs back electronically or sometimes by mail with a check that's attached, it just depends on how your provider wants to receive his payment. You have to read all those message codes, okay? And those message codes that says that they paid the pin or deny, paid the claim or deny the claim, okay? And you're gonna have to circle off, and it's good to be organized. So what you want to do is highlight all those message edits. Maybe you got a bunch that are for full-time student status. Maybe you got a bunch that's about adding a child on there. Maybe you have a bunch that's about questioning, hey, we need copies of the medical records sent to us, in order to pay this because we need to review this. You want to organize them according to the edit messages from the insurance company. And that's how you get things done. Okay, rather than you going backwards and forwards between the edit messages, you worked all the edit messages. Doesn't matter if it's from Cigna, Aetna, United Health, doesn't matter, Medicare, Medicaid, doesn't matter. You worked all the EOBs that says full-time student status. You worked all the EOBs that says all the kids added or foster, adopt, or born into the family. All the ones that saying, hey, we need a copy of your marriage license to prove that you're married, particularly if you've been single for quite a while at your company and it's the same insurance company. They need to recognize that. Okay, and it doesn't matter. They need that, and if you do that, it makes your work process go a lot more smoother. Okay, all right. I'm about to wrap this up. This is going on 48 minutes, 49 minutes. Thank you all so much for listening. I will come back to you with another video chat. Okay. Thank you later. Thank you. Thank you.